Have you ever looked around and just noticed how many people seem to be going it alone? Maybe it's even you. Well, it turns out we're living in this incredible age of individualism. And in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and see what's really going on.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Why is this happening? I mean, we've got all this technology connecting us, but in our work and even in our lives, we're acting more and more like solo operators. It's a huge change from how societies used to work.
And look, this isn't some abstract academic idea. Just listen to the words we use all the time. One-person companies, the gig economy, the solo hustle. These are more than just buzzwords, you know? They're a sign of a massive shift in our culture and our economy. This is just the way things are now.
Okay, so how do we even begin to make sense of all this? Well, the very first thing we need to do is change how we're looking at it. Instead of seeing our own personal struggles as just, well, our struggles, we need a new lens to see the whole landscape.
It's so easy to feel like the pressure you're under is all on you. You know, if you're feeling lonely working from home or you're stressed about landing that next freelance client, it's natural to think, what am I doing wrong? But what if you're not doing anything wrong? What if that personal trouble you're feeling is actually a piece of a much larger public issue?
And that brings us to this brilliant concept from a sociologist named C. Wright Mills. He called it the sociological imagination. And what it is, really, is the ability to connect the dots, to see the link between our own private lives and the giant historical forces that are shaping everything around us.
Let me break it down like this. Mills's classic example was unemployment. If one person can't find a job, that's a personal trouble. But if 15 million people can't find jobs, that's not a personal problem anymore. That's a public issue. And the same thing applies today. Your personal feeling of loneliness while working from home, that's a trouble. But an entire society feeling more and more isolated because of huge economic and tech shifts, that's a public issue that we need to understand.
So, to really get why our society is pushing us down this solo path, we have to do a little time traveling. We need to go back and figure out where this intense focus on the individual even started.
And for that, we're going to turn to another heavyweight of sociology, Max Weber. His book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, is absolutely key here. He traced our whole modern obsession with work and individual success all the way back to a pretty surprising place, religion.
Now, at the very core of his whole argument is this idea of a calling. And this one idea completely changed the game. It turned work from just something you had to do to survive into a moral duty, almost a sacred act. Like the quote says, doing your job well became the main way you could prove you were living a good life in the eyes of God.
And you can see how this idea evolved over time. First, it was a religious duty. You worked hard to honor God. Then, that duty turned into a systematic, disciplined way to make a profit, not to buy fancy things, but as proof that you were diligent and virtuous. And then finally, as society got less religious, the God part kind of faded into the background. But the engine of it all, that powerful internal drive for individual success, it stuck around, and it became the very spirit of modern capitalism.
Okay, but what's the price we pay for this constant individual chase? Let's move on and take a look at the real psychological and emotional toll it's taking on all of us.
The philosopher Bertrand Russell, wow, he really didn't pull any punches. He described the modern competitive life as a sprint, where the finish line is literally death. It's such a chilling way to think about it, right? A life of nonstop pressure where the race itself is the only point.
And Russell spelled out what happens when you live like that. It leads to this constant anxiety, a deep, gnawing loneliness. Your life outside of your job just starts to feel empty. And here's the crazy part. All that striving for success often ends up creating a crisis of self-esteem. It even makes it impossible to just kick back and enjoy your downtime.
And this sets up a really painful internal conflict. Russell basically said that you can't have real happiness if you don't have self-respect. But how are you supposed to respect yourself if the very thing that defines you, your work, feels totally meaningless, or maybe even like something you're ashamed of?
So all of this leads us to a really fascinating and kind of weird paradox at the very heart of our modern world. I mean, we feel like we have more freedom and more choices than ever before. But do we? Really?
To dig into this, let's put two very different ways of thinking side by side. On one hand, you have Herbert Marcuse's sharp critique of modern society. And on the other, you've got the deep psychological insights from people like Carl Jung and Alfred Adler.
So here's the clash. Marcuse, on one side, argued that we're living in what he called a democratic unfreedom. Sure, we're free to choose between different jobs or different brands, but all those choices are inside a system that's designed to keep us working and buying. But then on the other side, psychologists like Jung and Adler tell us something different about our own nature. They say we're wired for connection, for friendship, for cooperation. So that's the paradox. The society we've built pushes us to be individuals, but our deepest psychology is screaming for community.
All right, so after this whole journey through sociology, history, and psychology, what's the bottom line? Where has this road to going it alone actually taken us?
Let's just quickly connect all the dots one last time. It all started hundreds of years ago with a religious idea that made individual work feel sacred. That idea then became the fuel for the fire of capitalism and its intense competition. And today, we're seeing the final result, the solo economy, where each person is basically their own little business unit.
And that really is the heart of the story. Something that started as a way to find spiritual purpose has morphed into an economic system that demands we all fend for ourselves to survive. Yeah, we've gained a ton of independence, but it looks like the price we paid was a kind of isolation we've never seen before.
Which leaves us with one last really important question to think about. In this massive cultural shift toward being independent, solo individuals, what did we really win? And more importantly, what might we have lost?